Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our 5 questions, 5 answers series. I'm Amanda Lubinski, the managing editor here at the Courier-Tribune, and I'm joined today by Sheriff Will Akin of the Clay County Sheriff's Office. And we chose to interview Will today because not only is he the elected head of one of the largest law enforcement agencies in our region, but he's been involved in law enforcement, as he just told me a minute ago, pretty much his entire adult life, whether through the media or as a sheriff's deputy. And he's also been very involved in continuing education, professional development across the law enforcement spectrum, with himself even getting a doctorate. So we think he's going to be a great person to talk to today and give us lots of great feedback. So Sheriff Akin, Dr. Akin, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Will, for those of you who might not have had the opportunity to meet you yet, if you would, let's start off by telling the folks a little bit about yourself and the role that Clay County Sheriff's Office plays in the community.
Wow. Okay, so I'll just start off by saying I'm originally from California. I've moved 38 times in 48 years, lived in 10 states and 3 countries. But a little over 11 years ago, moved to Liberty, Missouri. And this has literally become home for myself and my family. Served 8.5 years in the United States Army, parachute rigger when I was enlisted. I was a Black Hawk pilot as a chief warrant officer, and then got out and started in my law enforcement career about 21 years ago with the Phoenix Police Department in Arizona. I spent 5 years there, 1 year in South Bend, Indiana with their police department, and then 3 years in Afghanistan working as a private contractor, basically working with police chiefs and advising investigators. Example, working crimes against women and children, gender rights violations, and human rights violations. Well, that's where I met the former sheriff, Paul Vescovo, and he said he was going to run for sheriff again, and he said that he was going to leave contract. And I said, well, good for you. I hope everything works out for you and you win. He goes, no, but if I win, I want you to come out and work with me. I was like, in Missouri? I've never been to Missouri, but long story short, he won, and here I am. And when he decided to retire, he told me, and I said, okay, I'll get my resume ready and I'll move on to a police chief position. And he said, no, you need to reconsider. He said, you've made a massive impact to Clay County and communities beyond our borders. And he goes, he said that he thought that I might be the next best person to sit in this seat as the sheriff of Clay County. So I thought about it long and hard, and finally made the decision, and the people accepted my bid for this office, and they voted for me. And that was a little over 3 years ago. So I'm really happy to be in this position now. I feel like I'm able to make a lot of decisions that are positive, not only for law enforcement, but for our community. And I'm going to continue to do it as long as the people will have me.
So, Will, how would you describe the mission of the Clay County Sheriff's Office?
Wow, I gave that a lot of thought before becoming sheriff, and I spent a lot of time researching other mission statements from police departments across the country, and even corporations, because 20 years ago, a mission statement was almost a full page. You're never going to get anyone to memorize a full page mission statement. And and for the last nearly 200 years that law enforcement has been in existence, through Reformation periods and stuff like that, we've always had a mission statement, and it's to protect and serve our communities and everything else. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to take it one step further. And when I was writing my dissertation and trying to take a break, from all that, I decided, what, let's keep it simple. And so I started thinking about it. And I came up with our mission statement. It was about 2 o'clock in the morning in my office at home. And it's embrace change, ... create value, ... and inspire others, ... Now I emphasize the ellipses because what I'm trying to do with our employees is there's the rest of the story. I want them to think about how they're embracing change, how they're creating value, and how they're inspiring others when they're doing their job of protecting the community and serving in this capacity. And it's 6 words. And I would say that the majority of our employees know what our mission statement is, and they know what it stands for. But we have a lot of new employees, and so we're always going through this mission statement. Hey, our mission statement, and what does it mean to you? So that's how I came up with the mission statement.
So in terms of, talk about what the mission is. So what were the biggest successes, the goals that you all achieved in 2023 in the Sheriff's Office?
2023 was a very difficult year for us. For example, our jail was built in 1984. It was updated in 2002. So it's 40 years old. And with a facility like that, if you don't keep up with the technology, with the maintenance, with any facility, things start degrading. And prior to my administration, the Clay County government was at severe odds with the Clay County Sheriff's Office. And, I would say, just to kind of summarize it, the Sheriff's Office and all of its facilities and things that we did was neglected. And so last year, that neglect really shined a light. I mean, it came to the top, it surfaced. And we realized that over the last 40 years, the wiring in our facility was so bad that it literally shut us down. At some points, we had no power, we had no running water. We had to take our inmates and house them out in other counties just so that we can do emergency repairs. And that started in April, and we didn't finish until December. And it was just really difficult. But in December, we finally got up to 95% operational, operations back in order. And that was a massive undertaking. But even though that's just one thing that we were working on, now we know with 100%, well, I'll say 99% confidence that things are supposed to be where they're supposed to be at now. And anything that comes up now will be small scale things that we can address as they come up, but it's not going to be multi-million, several millions of dollars to fix a problem that nearly shut our jail down entirely. But that's just one example. Another example of what we did last year on top of that, because just because we have something that's hard that we're dealing with doesn't mean that we can neglect the rest of our duties and responsibilities or our obligation to the community. And one of those things that we started was a community liaison deputy position or program. And so we identified Megan Blackburn, Corporal, who is now Sergeant Megan Blackburn, as our community liaison deputy. And she is the one that goes out into the community and starts building bridges, maintaining and sustaining relationships, and just doing things that brings the Clay County Sheriff's Office together with the community. Because we talked about mission statement, but we didn't talk about vision. My vision for the Clay County Sheriff's Office is bringing the Clay County Sheriff's Office and the community together through integrity and transparency. Now, you use the word transparency, and that's what we're doing today with this community conversation. But transparency to me is extremely important. Years ago, elected officials and people were always throwing out that new buzzword, transparency. But what I didn't hear was, how were they going to be transparent? Well, over the last 3 years of me being in the sheriff's office, and I talked about this during my last campaign, was I'm going to be transparent, but this is how I'm going to do it. And I basically opened the doors to our entire community to say, hey, come check out your sheriff's office. I might be the sheriff and I might be responsible for the office, but this is not my office per se. It belongs to the people. And so I've opened up my doors. We've done citizens academies twice a year, which are very staff intensive, but it's very important too. And in those academies, we show the attendees what we do within the sheriff's office. The only thing that I can't talk about are investigations. Those are protected because we want to make sure that people who are responsible for crimes are held accountable and not being dismissed because of a technicality because we accidentally let somebody know what was going on. So the community liaison program, it brings the community and the sheriff's office together. Yes, we're still responsible for addressing criminal matters and responding to people's locations during the worst times of their life when they have to actually call 911. But there's much more to our job. We have to continue to be integrated with the community, because at the end of the day, when I go home, when my employees go home and they take this uniform off, who are they? their husbands, their fathers, their brothers, their sisters, moms, their neighbors. They're part of our community. So, when people say, when they try to demean us or bash us because we don't understand what it's like to be in our community, well, no, we are members of the community. But this is why we have a community liaison program, because we want the community to know who we are, even outside of work. We're still members of this community. So those are the top two things, I think. Getting facilities and operations back in order, and then maintaining our efforts with the community.
Well, that's certainly a lot. Those are heck of goals there that you accomplished. So thank you for sharing that, Will. I think that's great feedback and important for people in the community to know. I think it gives a lot more understanding to kind of what it is the role of the sheriff's office is. Because a lot of times, as you just said, it's not just only investigations. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to add to it, the sheriff's office is there are four things that a sheriff's office, depending on the size county, we'll just stick with a first class county like Clay County. There are four things that I absolutely have to do by statute. One is to provide court security for our circuit court, civil process for communications to go out to the members of our community from the courts, maintain and operate a jail, and patrol certain county roads. We do have county roads, so we have a patrol. Nothing in statute does it say that I have to investigate anything. Nothing in statute says that I have to make transportation arrangements for extraditions. Nothing says that I have to do all the extra stuff that we're doing. But there is an expectation from our community as to what they expect from the sheriff's office. And yes, I could technically say, well, that's not a part of my job description. But is that going to be acceptable? Absolutely not. Because again, at the end of the day, when I go home, I look at my police department. It's not my police department, but I live in the city of Liberty. That's my police department. So when I call 911, who responds? The city of Liberty. Now, could I call one of my deputies? I guess I could, but how long is it going to take? Where are they at in the county that's 410 square miles? When I know Liberty Police is probably a couple miles down the road. So there's much more of an expectation as what the sheriff's office does outside of statute. And we need to be able to maybe not meet all expectations, but do the best that we can possibly do to be, again, a valuable partner in our community.
Well, thank you, Will. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. And so we haven't even gotten into the big 5 major questions yet. So we're already getting a lot of great information. So thank you. And so the first major question that we have is really, it's our most important, and that's why we're starting with it. And that is, I think you spoke to some of this already, but I think it'd be good to kind of drill it down. And that is, what are the most pressing challenges facing our community here at the local level now?
Oh, I guess that's a pretty broad question. So if I could clarify, are we talking about from like a crime position for law enforcement? I mean, can you kind of drill that in for me?
Yeah. So, I mean, you could really take it any way you want, honestly. But I think, starting with law enforcement is good. Because that's kind of the vector that you represent, yes. The one you're most familiar with. But yeah, if there's any other challenges, I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on there too, right? Because we don't just you don't just live and breathe in the law enforcement world, like you said. You're an active member of the community as well. So
yes, okay. So I'll just start with law enforcement perspective, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Challenges in our community from a law enforcement perspective is, I would say, 2 things that comes to the top of my head. One is theft, and the other is drugs. And, we'll just start with theft. So it really blew my mind when we started looking into the theft rate in Clay County. Now, to kind of break it down and illustrate my area of responsibility, versus a municipality's area of responsibility, I'm technically only accountable for what happens in the unincorporated area of Clay County. But we still assist with, our municipal partners, the police departments, because something that happens in a city doesn't just stay in a city. It goes across the county into another city and then down the county to another city. So it affects us all. But theft, when we still really started looking at this, it floored me because people view Clay County as the Johnson County, Kansas of Missouri. And the reason why I say it like that is because they think that everyone who lives in Clay County is rich. I don't know about you, Amanda, but I'm certainly not rich. But we have people who come from outside of Clay County, specifically to Clay County, to commit their crimes, and then they leave. And I'm not going to say which areas, but let's just say they're not homegrown. And so that presents a massive challenge for us. Now, we still do have criminal activity within our county and the cities and stuff like that. And we typically find them rather quickly. Because I think we have a great community. When people see something, they say something. And I have to stress, for people who are watching this, if you feel like you need to call 911, please call 911. That's what we're here for. Oftentimes I hear people say, well, I didn't think it was important enough to bother you with it, because we never know. And so don't try to figure it out for yourself. Call us and give us the opportunity to go figure it out. That's why we're here. So theft, we really embark on social media messaging and getting the word out and just explaining to people, don't leave their cars running in their driveway or in front of the QT or in front of a grocery store, especially when it's cold. I mean, that's typically when we see it, because we have people who are waiting in parking lots and on sidewalks and walking through neighborhoods, and they see an unattended car that's running and they jump in and they drive away. That's how we have vehicle thefts, or people leaving their cars unlocked at nighttime. It's when you think about crime of opportunity, when your vehicle's locked, the likelihood of somebody breaking your window to find out what's going on, what you have inside the car, those were the days of yesteryear. Now all criminals do is just check your door to see if it's locked, and then they can open the door and get inside your vehicle quietly. They don't have to, bring attention to themselves. And I'm going to use this as an example because it's really outside of the realm of comprehension. Please don't leave $5,000 in your console with your door unlocked. Please don't leave your expensive laptops in the back seat with your door unlocked. You see where I'm going with that?
Please don't leave your gun in your vehicle. We've seen a lot of that.
Leave your firearms in your vehicle with your door unlocked. And so those are some of the biggest challenges for us, because we respond, we take the report. People are often embarrassed because that's what they did. But it's really unfortunate when we hear people say, I never thought it would happen to me. Well, no one ever wants it to happen, let alone thinks it's going to happen to them until it happens to them. So that's the theft aspect of one of the challenges. The next is drugs. Drugs will always be here, and we see an uptick in different kinds of drugs. Like some areas of our country are starting to experience xylene. Xylene's a very dangerous drug. It turns people into literally zombies. A mixture of different drug compounds to make crystal. It's not just marijuana anymore. It's not just methamphetamines anymore. It's fentanyl. It's crystal. It's xylene, and it's gotten to the point now where, and in jest I say it like this: drugs aren't safe to take anymore. Back in the 70s and maybe the 80s, early 80s, when kids were experimenting with a little bit of weed or something like that, and the THC content was like 5-6%. That's not the case today. They can break down THC to the point where it's in the 90% of THC, and the use of vape is making it really easy to ingest these drugs. But then let's just talk real briefly about the legalization of marijuana. Now weed is available everywhere, but it's not just weed anymore. They're mixing it with fentanyl. Or if you buy weed from somebody who has bought weed, and let's just say I don't want my information known, or I don't want people to know that I'm smoking weed. Well, then they buy it from other people who are cutting it with something. And it has gotten so bad where when someone has an overdose from smoking weed because something was mixed in it, other users will see that as that dealer has the good stuff. And just to add insult to injury, those dealers are now handing out Narcan with their deal, and they're giving instructions to the user, have someone with you because this is the good stuff and you may need to be brought back. And users are going after it. And that's, wow, that, yeah, it impacts our community, but for those of us in law enforcement that have to deal with those situations, that really upsets us. Not because they're doing drugs, but it's because when someone overdoses and they die, look at the transcending effect, the resonating effect that it has, not just on the community, but what about that family? Those are members of our community. And so the drug issue has gotten really bad. And it's, again, it's not something that we can control. We will always do our job in combating, illegal narcotics and drugs and, going after the dealers and stuff like that. But we really need the community's help. And so what we started doing 2 years ago is community education forums. And we would go to churches or schools, we'd open it up to the community. And we've had groups of, I think the smallest group was maybe 10 people, all the way up to 100 people that would come to these community education forums and listen to our drug squad employees talk about the dangers of fentanyl. We invited our DEA partners, we invited our mental health partners for resources. There are resources out there that can help us, but the drug issue is not just a law enforcement issue, it's a community issue. And that's why I mentioned earlier, the importance of community and addressing issues that plague us. Because if we don't come together as a community, then I don't know how effective we're going to be in combating issues like drugs or theft or anything else that plagues our communities.
Thank you. I think the community forums, I'm glad you brought those up. I've attended several of those when you all did them, and I think they were really powerful, especially hearing from the young people who were addicts and who had OD'd accidentally on fentanyl. And I know that that's something that is really kind of plagued Clay County. We're seeing it in all of our schools. Is that we have kids as young as 12, 14 ODing on this stuff because they're taking pills that they don't realize is laced with fentanyl. And they're just such a tiny microscopic amount of fentanyl can absolutely kill you. So,
absolutely.
So how do we address it?
Well, I think the simple answer is give me more people, give law enforcement more personnel, but it's not that easy. I just kind of play on this idea for a second. If the county commission gave me 40 more positions to create a task force to combat drug issues in Clay County, my problem is, where am I going to get 40 people? I have vacancies right now and I don't have very many applicants. And when we talk about recruiting, hiring, and retention at the Clay County Sheriff's Office, our culture is absolutely amazing. We are very solid in how we do things and how we treat each other in the Sheriff's Office. But when it comes to recruiting and hiring, it's not that people don't want to go into law enforcement. They just don't want to go into law enforcement under the conditions that we're in right now. And that is being sorely underpaid, sorely understaffed, and with the amount of scrutiny, societal scrutiny that we see on social media, that we see in mainstream media, and which is why I'm happy to have this conversation with you, because you're local. I know you. We've worked together for years. Mainstream media, we don't get the opportunity to work with them, and so we don't have any influence in how they report on different issues. But all that wrapped up into a package is preventing people from wanting to be in law enforcement. And then take it one step further. Even if they want to be in law enforcement and they're called to serve their community in this capacity, their loved ones are saying, "What are you thinking? I don't want you to be a cop. Look what's happening in the world. Look at the ambushes that are happening." I mean, I think last year we saw the highest amount of ambushes in the country with law enforcement being ambushed and losing their lives to gunfire. Who would want to work in that environment? So going back to your question earlier well, I guess we didn't record it in this section, but talking about, big events and mass casualties and shootings and stuff like that. Why would anybody want to be in that type of situation, to run towards gunfire instead of away from gunfire? And now I'm not saying that's what we do all the time. And, I often think about how I hope for all law enforcement that they never have to draw their firearm and just do a 20, 30-year career with that record. Now, unfortunately, in today's world, when people are more emboldened to challenge law enforcement because of the lack of repercussions for their actions in criminal activity, we're starting to see an increase in people challenging law enforcement, and the results are often fatal, and that's unfortunate. So the recruiting and the hiring, it's not that people don't want to be in law enforcement. It's just the challenges getting them to the point where they finally commit to it. So even if the county commission gave me 40 more positions, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to fill it for years. So how do we do it? Well, again, I go back to community, and not just the members of our community, like residences. I'm talking about our mental health partners, our medical partners, our city partners, our, of course, first responders and law enforcement, but working with our federal partners. And I know sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, I don't want the feds in our community because of whatever. We absolutely have to have them with us working things that we don't have the resources for. So this is a collaborative effort, but let me add to it. We also need small businesses involved in this venture. We need the schools involved. I mean, I think we have the second largest school district in our county in the entire state of Missouri. So we absolutely have to have that school district, but it's not just that school district. I think we have 5 school districts in Clay County. So partnering with them, which we do, we have great partnerships with the school districts. I think that's where the community comes together, and we can make a much bigger impact instead of me just fighting for 40 extra positions where I don't even know if I'll be able to fill them.
Yeah, lots of food for thought there, Will. So thank you for that. One of the things you mentioned was kind of media. So, considering the evolving media landscape that we have, what role do you see local newspapers like ourselves playing in the community 3, 5, 10 years from now?
Well, there's this idea that local media, newspapers are going to soon be a part of our history. And I don't like that, because the local newspaper plays a huge part in our community. Not everyone's on Facebook, certainly not everyone's on Twitter or X. So the information that we put out on social media isn't going to be viewed by the 263,000 people that we have in Clay County or beyond. And so that's where I think the importance of newspapers and being able to capture what's happening locally, that's important, because not everyone's on social media. Not everyone is, and I would venture to say, and I don't have the numbers here, so don't quote me on this, even though we're recorded. I get the feeling that people are stopping, not watching TV anymore because they don't trust, what's being put out. So a demographic within our community is not getting information. I think that's where the local newspaper is important, because they will always look at the newspaper. There's always information. There's always things that are happening. So 3, 5, 10 years from now, I hope that, and I've already seen it, the newspapers have their print, but they also have their digital content. And so you're capturing a much larger demographic than just having a newspaper in a convenience store and a newspaper stand. But I think absolutely important that newspapers should stay alive, and instead of challenging you and your resources, Amanda Lubinski and the team at the Courier-Tribune, that you would be given more resources so we can have a much broader coverage of the entire county as opposed to just certain areas.
I'd love to be able to do that. So, there's a lot of stuff that you guys have done with just even hiring, a communications representative that actually comes from outside of law enforcement with your PR person, with Sarah, who does a great job. And she's all over the place on social media at different events. So, in talking about media consumption, which is kind of where it sounds like we were going with this, how do you anticipate changes in media consumption affecting community engagement overall?
Wow. So, man, that's something that I've actually been thinking about for years now. And I want to say it was the Denver Police Department who actually created their own studio to get their story out. And some people might think that's a conflict of interest because it's their studio, their employees, their reporters putting information out that's one-sided. And so even though I don't have the money to create my own studio, I did hire Sarah, who is not law enforcement, but has worked within the law enforcement realm for almost 20 years. And she actually started as a newspaper reporter. So she has this insight about how to get information out. And so what we've done over the last couple of years, actually over the last 10 years, but I was only a one-man show until I got some of my PIOs trained and able to get more information out. But Sarah took it to the next level. And instead of waiting for our local media outlets to cover either a good story or a bad story, we're sending information out often. And, we've updated our website, for example. So now if you want to opt in to getting information that we post on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and even LinkedIn, that it's there. And so we're just trying to add another element of transparency, but we can't do it by ourselves. That's why it's important for us to have that good working relationship with the newspapers and of course the networks, within our region. But as far as consumption goes, I wish people would pay attention more to what's happening in their communities. But I get it. I go to work and I do my job, and the last thing I want to do is find out what's bad happening in my area or across the country or globally. So I'm tired. So what I want to do is I want to spend time with my wife. I want to spend time with my neighbors, my friends, but I think still it's almost like an unwritten obligation that we still need to be aware of what's happening in our community. So how do we do that? Well, we push it out on social media. We have our community liaison role, so getting out in the community, but then also working with our partners like you.
So, Will, I think Sarah's done a great job, especially with social media and kind of just the way that she communicates on social media. It's not just the platform, but it's how that you all are using the platform. So do you think that there's emerging trends that you all are doing, or law enforcement or other community groups out there are doing that we at local newspapers should embrace and do more of ourselves?
Wow, that's a great question. And I absolutely think that we have changed the way we have sent information out. Sarah does a really good job by relating to the people. For years and years and years, law enforcement, when you think about the use of force, the old use of force continuum, the very first step was officer presence. And that was supposed to be high and tight haircuts and slim and your uniform fit correctly and everything was looking tidy and your boots shined and stuff. Now, I'm a little old school because I'm a little older, but I still value traditional presence and stuff like that. But we can't not, we have to be able to recognize that the world around us is changing. And when we look like something that people are turned away from, how effective are we going to be? So we've actually had to change the way we have been to become basically approachable. And so we do that while we're on the streets. I mean, I get messages, emails, direct messages on social media from members of our community saying, "Hey, Sheriff, I just want to let you know that one of your people pulled me over, and oh my gosh, they're extremely professional. It was a really good interaction." I'm thinking they probably didn't get a ticket or whatever, but but nonetheless, they're reaching out to me and they're talking about how professional we are. And it's because we're trying to change the way that we're viewed. Yes, we have a job to do. And yes, when we do write you a ticket, we're the jerk, never mind the reason why you got the ticket. And that was because of your actions. But we have to be more approachable. And Sarah has done a phenomenal job messaging on social media and with our communications partners on just getting a message out, and, as we would like having this community conversation right now. This is who we are. when you think about people saying, well, don't be fake, be genuine. Well, like I said earlier, we're husbands, we're wives, we're sisters, brothers. When we take this uniform off, so why can't I be that when the uniform is on? And just to let people know, hey, we are approachable. We're still human beings.
I think that's great feedback. Especially for us, because, as the community newspaper, media consumption is changing. And so we're trying to kind of be everything for everyone, right? But with a small staff of 2 in the newsroom, it's like, well, how do you do that and still do all of those things, like you said, be wives and moms and all of these other things? And really, for us, I know it's something that we've been looking at for years, and is, in the managing editor role, it's something that I consumes a lot of my time, is meeting our readers where they're at and giving them the kinds of information that they want. And so that's why you'll see us on social media. You'll see us, on the Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it nowadays, and you'll see us on Instagram and YouTube, and then you see us on the internet. And then we also have our print products and the different magazines and things we do. And so, but I think it's a struggle sometimes, because of a lot of the things that you just said, is, not only our own perceptions of what we've always been and just who we are as people, but kind of, knowing that the role that we have as, quote unquote, the fourth estate, of a way we're supposed to carry ourselves or interact with people, and kind of also still be unbiased, but as you said, approachable and engaged, and, still maintaining that kind of ethical stance that's outside and not completely 100% involved in some of the things. Because just like you all, when you're doing an investigation, we also have a job to do when we're at a scene or in a county commission meeting, or, out on the street and people are screaming at each other, or whatever the case may be. So I think that all of that kind of feedback is really important, just to all of us, but me especially in the role that I have as managing editor, because that's the kind of stuff that we need, that helps guide us to get that engagement. Because we can crank out all the great, what we think are great news stories loaded with facts and information, but if people aren't gravitating to it, if they're not reading it, if they're not going through all of that great text of copy, it's not sinking in, they're not getting it anyway, and we haven't done our job.
Yeah, looking at facts, and the truth about what's happening. In today's generation, we've got these, $1,300 handheld computers, and anything that I want to know comes at instantly when I Google it, or when I use Firefox, or whatever platform you're using. And so the information that I know that we put out and that you put out as reporters, people are like, what I wish people would do, and this is what I used to tell my students when I was teaching at the university, is question everything. Don't question it out of spite, but question it out of the search for knowledge. And I would tell my students, I'm like, even the information that I'm passing on to you, if something doesn't sound right, question me, and I will show you my resource. I just wish people would do that, because we all have bias. And, we look at something a certain way. And on social media, and as much as I love social media, I hate social media, because everything that I look at, the algorithm picks up, and it shows me more of what it thinks I want to see. And that's why I follow people from the entire spectrum. I want to confuse the algorithm as much as possible, because I'm always questioning, when something makes me feel good, and then all of a sudden confirmation bias sets in. I'm like, wait, that made me feel way too good. What's the rest of the story? And then I start searching. How do you do that in a 3-minute read or a 15-second short on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube? I mean, it's extremely challenging. So I don't know. We'll just keep doing what we can.
Well, I think Sarah does a great job, especially with getting people to relate, and pushing those where it's sometimes it's comical in a way, but not crossing a line. And I think that's important. I think that's something that we can definitely embrace, is bringing more of that relatability, and not just kind of those structured professional posts, like these are the information. I think that there's definitely a lot of room for growth there, for how we as an industry communicate overall, which sounds kind of odd to say, being that that's the business that we're in, is communication. But I think it's not just about the content, but how we relay that content. That is something we need to take a deeper dive at.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because we'll put something out on Facebook that'll get 600, 700 likes or 1,000 likes, but then you read the comments and people are saying that's unprofessional and you shouldn't be acting like that. And then when you go to their profile and you can tell the generational cohort that they're in, it's like, okay, so clearly our sense of humor is not met within that generational cohort, because they're expecting something a little more professional, as in how we used to do things back in the perhaps 70s or 80s. Versus how humor is met today or yesterday. So, it's funny because we could put something out and we're like, wow, that was a great post. But then you read that one post about how you're being unprofessional, and that's the one that affects us the most, because we want to meet everyone's need, but, clearly we're not going to be able to. So as long as we can reach the masses in our messaging and not just pushing it out, but then also looking and then trying to make ourselves better, I think that we'll continue to improve our messaging strategies, our skills. But we also have to realize that we're not going to make everyone happy.
Mm-hmm. So in your opinion, Will, what's the role that you think our newspaper should play in promoting civic participation and community involvement?
Oh, wow. People, I often get the question, why is this elected official doing this? And why is the government doing this? And I'll share a personal story really quickly. When I was running for sheriff, this lady came up to me and she said, I heard you're running for sheriff. And I said, yes, ma'am, I am. And she goes, well, who are you voting for president? Because that's going to be whether or not I vote for you for sheriff or as sheriff. And it caught me off guard, but I was able to come back very quickly and say, before answering your question, can I ask you a question? Will you please entertain a question from me? And she goes, okay. And I gave her a scenario that we just had gone through in Clay County. And I said, did you know about that? And she goes, that didn't happen here. That happened in Jackson County. And I said, well, actually, that was Clay County, and that was your commissioner. So I have to ask you, can you name who your presiding commissioner is? And she goes, well, what does that have to do with president? And I'm like, the reason why it's more important to know your local elected officials is because they're the ones who directly impact your life here at home. Now, granted, you're supposed to be aware of what's happening nationally, but my personal opinion is what happens nationally is what upsets people, and then they try to bring it home to local politics. And it's apples and oranges. And so going through this process with her, she goes, and then she finally realized, oh my gosh, that was Clay County. And I said, yes, and that's your commissioners making that decision. Now, just for clarification, it was the prior to the administration that we have now, or prior to the Clay County Constitution. So that was a time when we had 3 commissioners. Now we have 7 commissioners. But she was like, oh my gosh, I see, you're right. And I said, okay, so now you want to know who I'm going to vote for president? And she goes, well, yes. And I said, I have a son in Iraq right now and I want him to come home. She goes, I knew it. I'm voting for you. Did I ever say who I was going to vote for? No, but everyone knows that the president at the time had a very solid foreign policy. And my son was in Iraq and I wanted him to come home. Now, fortunately, he was just far enough away from al-Assad being rocketed by Iran. And, he called me up shortly thereafter and said, Dad, I actually saw the explosions from where we were at 80, 90 miles away. And I was just like, good grief. So civic responsibility, I tell people, be aware of who your local elected officials are, because they're the ones who impact us the most. And don't be upset because something happened if you didn't vote, because you let it happen. Well, my vote doesn't count. I'm just one person. Well, if you had, so just as an example, 178,001 registered voters in Clay County. If you had 50,000 people who said my vote is only just one vote, then you're 50,000 people short. And to cap this civic conversation, when we put up the 911 device fee, which let's call it what it is, it's a tax. only 4,000 people out of 178,000 people voted yes. And they are the ones who dictated what was going to happen that affected your wallet. Now, I'm grateful that they did, because we absolutely needed that fee, because the way we used to do things, it wasn't sustainable, and we were spending taxpayer dollars out of the general fund to make up for the shortfall of our obligation to pay our bill. But just think about that. 4,000 people voted yes, roughly. And I think it was like 2,000 something voted in opposition.
And sadly, that's become a good voter turnout. You know, I cover elections all the time. We're in an election season right now. Municipal elections, so the school board tends to bring people out, but for, you know, mayoral races and alderman races, they often don't. We see, you know, if we're lucky, 10% voter turnout. So literally just a few hundred people. In some of our smaller communities, I've seen this in Holt through the years, you know, a literal handful of votes makes a difference.
Yeah.
They're
so
the
that's
ones
why,
that decide.
yeah, and that's why I think it's important for people to look at their newspaper, because in my opinion, the Courier-Tribune, you and your team, you do a great job bringing light to who is running for what races in the different municipalities and throughout the county. And it's not just county commission or the mayoral race, it's the water district, it's the school districts, and people are like, we have to vote for water people? Yeah, you do. But you know, I think the number one thing that I hear people say is, I just don't know who to vote for because there's no information about them. And I'm like, well, no, actually, there's a lot of information out there. You just have to do your part to go look for it. And I think that if the Courier-Tribune continues to do what they do in these coverage, you know, with your coverage, I mean, you're going to continue to be that trusted source of getting information from the elected officials. And I would go as far as saying that if an elected official or a candidate didn't take the time to interview with you or your team, then that's a sure sign right there that you probably shouldn't give them consideration.
You said that, I didn't. So well, I appreciate that, Will. We do have some folks right now that, you know, for various stories that we've written on in the State House, that we didn't hear back from some of our state reps who are going to be up for re-election soon. So food for thought there.
It's a challenge. And, you know, as an elected official, and, you know, every time we talk about, oh, I'm going to be transparent, I'm going to be transparent, I'm going to have a policy of transparency, that's all fine and dandy. But when you don't talk about the good or the bad with the good, then are you truly being transparent? I mean, even when we mess up, we always try to get ahead of it and say, hey, look, again, we're human beings. We're not perfect. We're not robots. We do mess up from time to time. But I think what we've done is we've made enough emotional deposits, if you will, in the trust bank, that when we do mess up, people say, you know what? Okay, that's unfortunate, but they're telling us what they're going to do to prevent it from happening again. And that's all we can do. But we're still being transparent even when we mess up. And I think a lot of people have a hard time talking about the things that, you know, that they're deciding upon that, you know, isn't being shared by the rest of their constituents, which is a challenge, which, yeah, I have no interest in going to Jeff City. I'm going to be right here at the sheriff's office, because even when we mess up, I feel like it's so much easier to deal with, because we've built that trust with the community.
So kind of keeping in the same vein of participation and community involvement, what community events or activities do you think we at the newspaper should better cover? And, you know, maybe it's from a law enforcement perspective, or maybe it's just from Will Akin, the Liberty community resident perspective.
Yeah, so man, everywhere I go, because I'm extremely involved with the community. You know, when I talk about community, I mentioned earlier I live in Liberty, but when I talk about my community, I think of Clay County. So I don't just go to Liberty events. I go to Excelsior events. I go to Smithville events. I go to Gladstone, North Kansas City. I mean, shoot, even Lawson, you know, we try to coordinate there. I actually did not know this, but Missouri City has an annual parade. And I was invited, and, you know, when they invited me, I was like, Missouri City has a parade? I was like, absolutely, I'm going to be a part of that, you know, because they're a part of our community. But, you know, one of the things that impresses me the most is everywhere I go within Liberty and even Gladstone, because your coverage area is just I mean, I don't know what it is entirely, but I feel like you're everywhere. Either you or Kelly, because like I'll be at something, all of a sudden Kelly will walk in, or I'll see you over sitting in the corner, just taking notes and stuff. And I'm like, that is awesome, because, and this is just my opinion, I've never been a newspaper reporter or anything like that, but I think when you really focus on local stuff as opposed to the national stuff, you might want to throw some stuff in there like that. But I think the important thing is the local stuff. And it's not just one thing or another. It's everything. It's everything from politics to sports to the sheriff reading at the local library, stuff like that. And I think when you're able to cover as much as you can, you've already said you have a small team, and I wish you guys had more resources. But if you did have more resources, I know I'm pretty confident that I would probably see someone everywhere I go, even at the donut shop when we're having donuts with deputies.
We try to be. But yeah, for yourself and anyone watching this, we are hyper local, and that's kind of a buzzword in our industry. But what that means to us is we cover Clay County government, which it's typically me doing that most of the time. But we spread that around. But then the cities of Gladstone for the Gladstone Dispatch, and then for Courier-Tribune, we're hyper focused on Kearney, Liberty, and Smithville, and those like pocket communities kind of surrounding them. But really mainly the crux is those communities of Kearney, Liberty, and Smithville. So we do try to get to as many community events as we can. If we can't, we try to coordinate, information about that, whether we try to get that in print before or after the fact with photos or something like that. But I appreciate the compliment. We certainly can't be everywhere at once. I hear that all the time as people will say, well, I can't believe you didn't know about that, or you weren't there. And it's, well, I think I've heard this from an old editor years and years ago, and it's always made me giggle. But the longer I do this, the more it becomes true, is that, sometimes I think people think that we're just standing in a field waiting for something to happen. And unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case. I wish I had more time like that. So, the vote of confidence is nice. We definitely try to get to as many community activities. But, and again, this is for the people who might be watching this. If there are community activities and things that you want to know more about, let us know that. We're chomping at the bit to give people the information, the news and information that they're looking for, the things that impact them in their daily lives, whatever that may be. So we want to know about that, and we want to report it to them. We can't do what we do without the community. It's a very reciprocal process, just like it is with what you all do in law enforcement.
Absolutely. That's why we love hearing from the people. We do a lot of engagement on social media because, if one person is thinking they want to hear a piece of information, then I think the assumption is there are many other people who want to hear the same thing. They just didn't reach out. So when it's something that is in line with our expertise, then that's what we focus on. Then we try to push information out. But, we only know what we know, and we don't know what we don't know. And if the questions aren't out there, or if people aren't engaging with us, then we won't know what to push out if it impacts them. And I'm sure it's the same for you and your team and the community and how they respond.
Yeah, absolutely. The decisions we make about coverage and things, they're not made in a vacuum. And if there's something we're missing the mark on, we want to know about that. So because there's always room for improvement.
Yep.
So, well, we've talked about a lot. We've covered a lot of ground here today. So there's just one last question I've got for you. And it's kind of talking about the economic landscape, right? We've talked kind of around this in various capacities in our conversation today, but considering the economic landscape we have, how do you think our newspaper can support local businesses and contribute to economic growth in our community?
Oh, wow. So, man, I would say if I could just think of something off the top of my head, and I would say probably coordinate with the different chambers, the different chambers of the municipalities. And the reason why I say that is because Liberty Chamber, for an example, I think they have 400 partners, small businesses that are members of the Chamber of Commerce. And, it would be nearly impossible for you to reach out to all 400 members of just that one chamber. let alone Gladstones or Smithvilles or Excelsior Springs. But coordinating with them to try to get information out, to really highlight the businesses that we do have in Clay County. It's really easy to jump on Amazon.com, and I'm not trying to, advertise for them by any means, but it's really easy to go on that website and then just order something and then have it at your doorstep the next day. But when we have hundreds, if not thousands of small businesses in Clay County that are, I don't know, I guess, barely making ends meet because everyone's shopping on a big website as opposed to shopping locally. I know for myself and my wife living in Liberty, we always try to buy local as much as we can. We always shop local. When I say local, again, Clay County, not just Liberty, we try to go out. But that's something that's important to us because our community is important to us. Now, when you talk about inflation and, the dollar just doesn't go as far as it used to and stuff like that, like I completely get that. And I'm not saying that everyone should shop local because sometimes it does cost a little more and we have to do the best that we can with what we have. But, just kind of highlighting the businesses that are in Clay County, or at least within your coverage area, to give a little more spotlight to them. So that way, if someone is thinking about buying something online, but literally that one business is right down the street from them, like go over there and give them a shot, at least, and get inside the door and have a conversation with them because, I know a little bit about business and marketing and stuff like that. But when you have a personal relationship with someone, it's so much easier to buy from them as opposed to just going online and buying something that you hope comes unbroken. And it's okay. It's pretty easy to just send it back, but it's a lot different when you can go into a store or a restaurant and walk in and you know who the manager is or who the owner is, and you want to help them out. And so you build that kind of like that loyalty within our area of shopping locally. So I think, working with the chambers of commerce for the different cities, that I think that would be a good start. Beyond that, I have no idea because that's just so overwhelming for me to even think about. Yeah, I think the chambers would be a great start. I know all the directors and they're all great people and they really have a heart for helping the small business community out. And, just to kind of add this as a side note, I didn't realize what the small business community meant in our community, in our county, until March 6th of 2017. That's when the tornado ripped through Smithville and impacted 2 neighborhoods and literally took one house completely off the foundation, and it really impacted their community. Well, we had a lot of first responders, we had hundreds of volunteers come out, but we were not organized until the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce in Smithville came up and she's like, I don't know anything about this, but how can I help? And we were like, can you just coordinate food and water and tools? And the next thing we knew, in the Smithville City Hall, we had Home Depot and Lowe's and restaurants with sack lunches and Operation Barbecue relief. And like we had all this stuff, and it was because the small business community came together and helped out beyond my wildest imagination. And I've worked several incidents, man-made disasters, natural disasters, but that is one that I will never forget because of how the small business community came up. After that happened, I went back to my team and I said, we've been going about this not the best way. I was like, we absolutely have to get involved with the small business community. So now we're members of the Chamber of Commerce, and we're working with them. We do speaking engagements on how to be prepared for emergencies or disasters, and just giving, presentations on how to, do things in the home or what not to do during the cold season and even in the hot season. And it's, wow. So that was 7 years ago now. And now we're highly involved with the small business community. So that's where it's at. And I think that would be a great start, in my opinion.
I appreciate that. I don't disagree. And just you're not the only one in the hot seat. I actually asked the same questions of Stacy Bratcher, who's the executive director of the Kearney Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah.
And so, and we are members of the Gladstone, Smithville, Liberty, and Kearney Chambers of Commerce. I actually spent a number of years on the marketing committee for the Chamber of Commerce in Kearney. So I don't disagree with anything you said. And I was actually there when that tornado hit and ripped through Smithville. And I think you categorized it very well. Watching that come together and how they did that, I think is a great example of, how we can take lessons from something that wasn't necessarily what you would normally think of as a communications event, but it absolutely was, and how the chamber brought that together. I think that's a great point. So thank you for sharing, Will.
Yeah, you bet.
Well, that's all of the questions we have today. So again, Will, thank you so much for being part of our 5 questions, 5 answer series. Before we leave, though, I do have one last question for you. At the beginning of this, I told you that community conversations was part of an overreaching effort where we're not just asking folks like yourself, but there's going to be a community survey that we put out to the public. So is there a question that you would like us to include on the upcoming survey, something that you would like to know or the sheriff's office would like to know from the community?
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much for that opportunity, because I was just talking with a friend of mine who is getting ready to retire from his industry to work with a survey company. And we were talking very briefly about what a survey company could do for the sheriff's office. And I said, police departments or cities, municipalities have a water department, and they can send out like a little survey to everyone who has water go into their house, and they can ask questions. The Clay County Sheriff's Office doesn't have that, because again, we have our area of responsibility is the unincorporated area, and we do have about 23,000 people in the unincorporated area, but we have no mechanism to survey them. We don't have a water department. I mean, we have a highway department, but that's really different. That's roads and bridges and stuff. But if there was a question that could be specifically to how do you view the sheriff's office and the service that they provide the community, not just the unincorporated area, because we're everywhere, but then also, the perception of how we work with their cities or the municipalities. I mean, that would be extremely helpful to us, because we're always looking for ways to improve how we do things with what we have. Again, I would love to have more people. I would love to have millions of dollars more to buy equipment and software and bring more technology to the sheriff's office, which we have done phenomenally over the last 3 years. But is it ever enough? No. But if we could know, if we could find out what we could do, what we're doing good and what we could do better, that would be extremely helpful to us.
Okay, duly noted. I appreciate it. I want to know the same things for us. So yeah. I appreciate it. Well, thank you again for joining us today. If you would please help us spread the word about this community conversation. So if you or Sarah, who's your PIO, would help us share that out on Facebook, social media, we would certainly appreciate that. Our Facebook page is at My Courier-Tribune for those of you out there watching this. So thank you again, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, Will.
Thank you so much, Amanda.
Thanks.